Whether we like it or not, cold weather is on its way. Winter is here, and it's time to winterize your motorcycle.
This video is sponsored by Cruiseman's Garage Honda Goldwing Maintenance Video Series.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Cruiseman's Garage. Today I'm going to give you 12 tips on things that I think you should consider when putting your bike in storage or you're going to not be riding during the winter months. You know, we're pretty fortunate here in Texas. I can ride almost year round. I don't really have to store the bike for long periods of time. But many of you live in parts of the country or parts of the world where cold weather and icy conditions, snow, things like that, make it necessary for you to store your motorcycle and not ride it for weeks or months at a time. So there are some precautions you can take to help protect your bike in those harsh, cold conditions, and that's what we're going to talk about today. These are my recommendations on what you should consider to do to properly store and winterize your motorcycle. Now, what I'm going to talk about doesn't just apply to a Honda Goldwing. I happen to own a Honda Goldwing, but these tips and tricks will apply to any motorcycle and even your ATVs or your small gear equipment. Anything with, that you keep in your garage should benefit from this information. So I will try to make it as generic as I can, but I will talk about some things specific to the Honda Goldwing, since many of my viewers do own a Honda Goldwing. My first tip may seem pretty obvious, and that is to, before you put your bike in storage for the winter, always change your oil. Now, there's been a debate, as long as I can remember, should you put fresh oil in the bike before you store the bike, or should you wait until springtime when you're ready to start riding again, maybe drain the oil then and put fresh oil in the bike? I'm kind of in that camp of you should do it before you store the bike. Your oil does contain some contaminants depending on how many miles you have on the last oil change. And you don't want those contaminants sitting in the engine throughout the winter. So I believe personally it's a good idea to go ahead and change your oil and the filter. And if you have a Goldwing with a DCT transmission or another motorcycle with a DCT transmission, I would actually change both filters. I'd go ahead and do that. That way you've got a nice fresh set of oil and filters so that when springtime comes, you can basically start the bike, get on it, and ride and enjoy the bike. Now, my second tip revolves around brake fluid and clutch fluid. And brake fluid is hygroscopic, which means it attracts moisture from the air. So any moisture that's in your brake system can cause damage over time. Not only that, imagine that your bike's out in the garage, there's moisture in those fluids, and you get below freezing temperatures. Now you potentially could introduce ice into your brake system. I would prefer to have very fresh brake and clutch fluid in the system, in the hydraulic system, before you store the bike. I would definitely consider that, especially if you have more than 10,000 miles on the motorcycle since the last brake and clutch fluid change. The next thing would be your coolant. If you have a motorcycle that's liquid cooled, and you have on a Goldwing, I recommend every 25,000 miles, draining, flushing, and replacing the coolant with fresh coolant. This one may not be as necessary as the brake and clutch fluid and the oil and filter, but I'm saying if you've got close to 25,000 miles before you get ready to store your bike, and I'm talking about 25,000 miles since your last coolant flush, assuming that you've had it done before, I would go ahead and do it before you store the bike. Once again, coolant can get contaminated. It can, deteriorate over time. So why not go ahead and do it while you're doing all of these things and getting your bike ready for winter storage. If you own a Honda Goldwing, my video series shows you how to do the oil and filter change, the brake fluid flush and bleed, as well as the coolant flush and bleed. So Those three things alone, just what a dealer would charge in labor to do those three things, will more than pay for the videos. So if you don't already have my Honda Goldwing maintenance videos, I'll put links in the description of this video where you can get more information on that. Everything I'm talking about today is doable by a user with some pretty basic tools. So you may wish to consider that. My next tip revolves around adding fuel to your fuel tank. Before you put your bike away for the winter, I want you to fill the fuel tank up as full as you can get it. Most fuels today contain some ethanol, and ethanol also attracts moisture from the air. It's not good for your engines. So if you have the opportunity to get ethanol-free fuel in your area, I would fill the bike up with ethanol-free fuel. The less air there is in the fuel tank, the less moisture your fuel can attract from the air because there's less air available for it to attract from. So ethanol-free if you can do it. If not, you may wish to consider a fuel stabilizer like Stabil. That's what I've used in the past, and it works very well. Now, I would add the fuel stabilizer to your fuel tank after you've filled it up, and then you'd want to start the engine and let it run until it comes up to full temperature. And you might want to let it run for 10 minutes or take it for a short ride if weather allows you to do that, because you want to get that fuel stabilizer all integrated into the fuel system so that it can do its job. And it will help a little bit with the ethanol as well. So consider that for your storage. Make sure you fill up your fuel tank, and if you can, use ethanol-free gas. Now, my next tip revolves around protecting the paint and the finished surfaces on your motorcycle. Your air and dust and contaminants get on your paint, and the longer they sit on the paint, the more damage they can do. Things like bird droppings, water spots can etch your paint. They can cause all kinds of issues. So if you want your motorcycle to look as good as possible, I recommend that you thoroughly wash the motorcycle. Make sure you clean the wheels thoroughly. I like Super Clean's all wheel cleaner because it will get the brake dust off of those wheels. And those contaminants can really cause damage to your paint, your wheels, and your tires over the winter. So a good, clean motorcycle, that's the way you want to store your bike for the winter. It wouldn't be a bad idea at this time to go ahead and give the motorcycle a nice little wax job, or if you wish to do a ceramic coat on your motorcycle like I have, that would offer even more protection during the winter months. A good clean motorcycle, make sure the windshield is clean, make sure all the parts of the bike are thoroughly clean. Now, after you've washed and maybe even waxed your motorcycle, I would highly consider covering it for the winter. Now, this depends on how long you're going to have the motorcycle stored. If you're going to have it stored for more than 30 days, I would definitely put a cover on the bike. Garages tend to get dusty, and as that dust settles on the bike, you're talking about more potential contamination. So I would suggest at least a half cover if you have a garage attached to your home where it stays maybe relatively warm. You know, my garage will probably never get below 30 degrees. If you're storing this in a detached garage without heat and the bike gets down into the 20s or below, I would go ahead and put a full cover on the motorcycle. I use ones from UltraGuard. I've found them to be very good, very reliable, and that will keep your bike clean. So when springtime comes, you can take the cover off. You've got a beautiful, clean bike ready to ride. So let's talk about your battery. This is one of the most important things you can do to winterize your bike and preserve the life of your battery, because batteries typically hate cold weather. The colder it is, the worse they perform. Here's what I recommend. You should at least have your motorcycle battery on a battery tender, a maintainer. I use the one from Battery Tender, but there's several good ones on the market. I'll actually put links in the description of this video. Now remember, if you by some chance have replaced your battery with a lithium-ion battery, that takes a completely different type of battery maintainer. You don't want to use a regular glass mat battery maintainer on a lithium-ion battery. So make sure you've got the proper maintainer for your motorcycle. Installing one of these little SAE connectors is very easy to do. Install it on your battery, and then you've got a quick connect, so you can very easily plug in and unplug your motorcycle when it's home or when it's in storage. And here is another little tip. If your motorcycle is going to be in extremely low temperatures for an extended period of time, say 25 degrees or less for more than a couple of weeks, I would consider removing the battery. Actually remove it from the motorcycle and put it indoors or in a temperature controlled area where it doesn't stay below 25 degrees for an extended period of time. It will only help extend the life of that battery. And also, even if you do remove it and put it inside your home or your garage or temperature controlled area, you still need to keep it on a battery maintainer. Now, something that a lot of people don't think about is that mice and little critters can get inside your motorcycle in cold weather to build a nest. I've seen many pictures of air cleaners that have mouse nests inside of them. So here's what I recommend, a couple of things. First of all, cover your mufflers. Some mice will actually get up inside your muffler and go up in close to the engine, and they'll start trying to build a nest up in there. Now, I like to use blue painter's tape and just put masking tape over the ends of the mufflers. And I also put a little piece of tape with a note on it on my ignition, so I don't forget. You don't want to go out in the spring, turn the bike on and start it up with your mufflers covered up. Now, critters can still get up into your air cleaner through the inlet ducts, which are under the shelter. What I would do if you have issues with mice in your area, I would put some mouse traps around the bike so that you trap them before they have a chance to get up into your air cleaner and cause any potential damage. To remember to turn off your smart key. If your motorcycle has a key fob that has a battery and you have the ability to turn it off like you do on a Honda Goldwing, I would turn the battery off and leave it off during the winter. It's just going to preserve the life of that battery. The batteries are easy to change, but it still doesn't hurt to go ahead and turn it off. Now, on a Honda Goldwing, you basically just press that logo button, hold it down until you see one flash of the LED. That means the key is now off. And then when you're ready to ride again, you press and hold that button down until you see 3 flashes of the LED, which tells you the key is now back in service. It's on again. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is protecting the vinyl seat. There are a lot of people that have cracks in the seams of these vinyl seats, and some of that could be a result of going through 2 or 3 winters where they didn't properly care for the seat before they put it into storage. Now, I highly recommend you use a product from Cycle Care Formula 4, and you liberally put it on your vinyl seat. It will condition that vinyl and help protect it for the winter months. Of course, you're going to want to cover the bike as well. That helps protect the seat. Again, if you are in extreme temperatures where it's below 25 degrees for an extended period of time, I would say any more than 2 or 3, maybe 4 weeks, I would consider removing the seat from the motorcycle and take it indoors into a warmer climate. I know it's a hassle, but this seat costs $1,000. Okay, so you want to protect it. So if you have the opportunity to remove the seat, take it indoors. If you live in one of those environments, if it's not going to get that cold, then I wouldn't worry about it. I would just condition it and cover it and be done. So my next tip revolves around whether or not you should store your motorcycle on the side stand or on the center stand. I kind of am of the belief it's better to put it up on the center stand, because that way you have no weight on the rear tire. You still have a little weight on the front tire, but not the full weight of the motorcycle. I also think it's a pretty good idea to add a little bit of air pressure to your tires, maybe 3 or 4 pounds. That way they can hold their shape a little better during the winter months. You can always remove that air if you need to in the springtime. You definitely want to check your tire pressure before you ride, anytime you ride, especially after storage. So I would add 3 or 4 pounds to each tire over and above what you normally keep them at. If you normally keep them at 40, put them at 42, 43, something like that. Now, if your motorcycle does not have a center stand, you could leave it on the side stand, or you could get some sort of a jack or something to keep the bike up level during the winter months. That's up to you. There are other ways that you can get the bike vertical with other types of stands depending on your motorcycle. If you have a Goldwing Tour, it has a center stand. Most of your big touring bikes are going to have a center stand. Of course, this wouldn't apply to an ATV or something like that. The other thing to consider is if your motorcycle has the ability to adjust the preload on your suspension system, I would recommend turning it all the way down as low as you can go, even to 0 if you have that option. On a Honda Goldwing, we have 4 different settings for suspension preload. I would go ahead and take it all the way down to the lowest setting. And the last little bonus tip is don't feel like during the winter that you have to come out and start your motorcycle periodically and let it run. You don't have to do that, especially if you've removed the battery. Just leave it stored with all of the cover on, the protections that you've taken, and it will be fine for several months if necessary. And then in the springtime, go out, start your bike, and go for a ride. And go enjoy your winter months as much as you can until springtime. And then in the springtime, take that cover off, start up your fob, your smart key if you have one, get on that bike and ride. Ride often, but ride safe. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up. That really does help my YouTube rankings. And I will see you on the next Cruiseman's Garage.